Hey guys, let's go ahead and go over our lesson 2 notes, cycles of matter. The 4 cycles are water, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And by cycles, we see that it goes from the atmosphere back down to the earth and back up to the atmosphere and round it goes. How does matter move in ecosystems? Many types of matter are used over and over again in the environment. The way water and gases move through ecosystems and are used over and over is called a water cycle. Most of Earth's water is in the oceans. The path water follows as it moves from Earth through the atmosphere and back to Earth is called the water cycle. The 3 processes involved in the water cycle are evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Water changes from a liquid to a gas during the process of evaporation, and that's going to occur on any body of water, ocean, lake, pond, stream, puddle. Water vapor changes back into liquid water during condensation, and condensation is our clouds. Rain, snow, sleet, and hail are examples of precipitation. So that's water falling from the clouds. And what type of precipitation it is dependent upon the temperature of the air. If the temperature is well above freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, it's going to fall as rain. If it's well below, it's going to fall as snow. It's when we're hovering at that 31, 32, 33 that you're going to have that sleet and freezing rain. One thing I want you to add to the side of your notes is this idea of transpiration. Transpiration, release of water vapor from the leaves and stems of plants. So please add that to your notes. The second cycle is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is an important element in proteins which all organisms need to survive. All organisms need this element naturally occurring in nature off the periodic table, N. All living things need it to survive. Nitrogen in DNA is essential to passing on genetic information. During the process of nitrogen fixation, nitrogen changes from a gas into a form that organisms can use because the gas form is actually N2. So 2 atoms of nitrogen bonded together. That makes the gas form. 78% of our atmosphere is nitrogen, but we can't use any of it in the gas form. Bacteria in the soil and water fix nitrogen gas in compounds that organisms can use. Some plants obtain the nitrogen they need when they eat plants that have absorbed nitrogen compounds from the soil. So we've got certain plants, legume plants, clover, that are nitrogen fixing plants, and we've got these roots, right? As you saw in your ed puzzle, we've got nodules on it and there's bacteria there, and they're going to take in the bacteria, and through a series of transformations and bacteria you will get it to the point where it is in a form that a plant can use. It's not toxic, and then the plants are going to absorb that nitrogen and use it for their own growth and then store the rest in its leaves, fruits, roots. And so when we eat that leaves, fruit, and roots, we get the nitrogen. So bacteria in the soil break down dead organisms and waste. Thus, nitrogen returns to the soil. So we've got decomposers here that are going to break down the organisms into that have died and break it down and return those nutrients to the soil. So then we have a certain bacteria there that are going to release it back into the gas form that goes back up into the atmosphere. So we've got the oxygen cycle next. Oxygen is the element O on our periodic table. and there are 2 of them in the oxygen in our atmosphere. The process that is the main source of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere is through photosynthesis, is through the producers, is through the green plants that make their own food and release the oxygen as a byproduct. One thing I want you to add is up here the idea of this phytoplankton release more than 50% of the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. I believe this is on your study guide. What is phytoplankton? Well, phytoplankton is microscopic algae. It's going to be in your oceans, which, cover 70 something percent of our surface of our earth. They undergo photosynthesis, and we know with photosynthesis that the byproduct is oxygen. So if we have all of this algae in all of these oceans undergoing photosynthesis, we're releasing an enormous amount of oxygen. About more than 50% of the Earth's oxygen is due to this plant. So it's also a very important part of the marine ecosystem in the food web, which we will take a look at in lesson 3. So the oxygen cycle involves changes from oxygen to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is our carbon element, one of those, and 2 of our oxygen element. 2 of those bonded together with 1 carbon create carbon dioxide. When we breathe in oxygen for our use, when we breathe out, that's our byproduct. That is necessary for our plants. They take that in through their leaves, and they use that for their growth, and their byproduct for cellular respiration is giving off oxygen. So round and round it goes. So we've got the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle, there's also another element, carbon, and it's necessary for all living things. So now we have 2 elements, right, that are necessary for all living things. One of them being nitrogen, and one of them being carbon. Super important, you guys remember that. Okay, we've got carbon and nitrogen are the 2 elements necessary for all living things. When dead organisms decompose, carbon returns to the soil, and carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. So we've got our decomposers that are returning both the carbon and the nitrogen from that are stored in animals and plants, in organisms, and returning them then to the soil, and then returning them to the atmosphere. In the atmosphere, carbon appears as carbon dioxide, CO2. The process through which thermal energy from the sun is absorbed and keeps the earth warm is called the greenhouse effect. Well, that's important. This greenhouse effect, it is what keeps us not too hot, not too cold. It's the too much of these greenhouse gases, too much carbon dioxide building up in our atmosphere, too much thermal energy absorbed and retained is what's leading to this global warming. But the greenhouse effect is responsible for keeping our earth warm. It's a good thing. Okay. In this space here, I want you to write this formula, the formula for photosynthesis. It is the process by which plants make their own food. So it is the energy from the sun and carbon dioxide and water yield or produce glucose, sugar, and oxygen. So the formula for that is the energy from the sun. We need to have 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water are going to yield, which also means to produce, will produce 1 glucose molecule, and 6 oxygen molecules will be released into the atmosphere. Now, this glucose molecule will be used by that plant for its growth, and then it will store it. This is what is stored in the leaves and the fruit and the roots of that plant. And so when we eat those roots and leaves and fruit, we're getting that stored glucose. We're getting that stored energy. So be familiar with this. Okay, write this down. By writing it out, you will have a place that you can reference it, because we're going to talk about it a little bit when we come down to talking about the producers. The producers make their own food. We're consumers. We can't make our own food. Producers are making their own food through the process of photosynthesis. And you're going to learn a little bit about the fact that some plants deep down in the ocean will use it. Chemicals where the sun doesn't reach. Okay, but for mostly it's photosynthesis. I can't say that all plants use photosynthesis, because we do have a population of plants that use chemosynthesis. That's lesson 3. So get this written in and reference it when we talk about it in lesson 3. All right, guys. Get these filled in. You can use your notes for your comprehension check, and I will talk with you soon.